a large portion of the audience are here for the first time. So the trick is to make sure you come back for the second and the third and the fourth time. So before introducing our wonderful guests this evening, let me just give you a little bit of context as to what the space is and specifically what tonight's about. So Spark Lab is an initiative by Spark to help unlock the potential in all New Zealanders and New Zealand's business. And the way I've described this is that's quite a lofty statement to make, and it reads wonderfully on a PowerPoint chart. And it's probably not something not unfamiliar from what you've seen in a number of organizations. But I haven't been involved with an organization that have done this to the level that Spark have. And by that I mean literally we are about to approach 150 of these events. And the events are based on an idea of bringing together communities of interest to bring wonderful speakers along and to help smash some of the jargon and lingo that otherwise you might read in a management book. So where that started was last year we started around communities of interest or passion points. So we had film, fashion, music, art, architecture. And during those series, which were again really well attended, some of the observation became, look, these are really interesting, but what would be great is to bring it together around business and commerce. Because as business owners or business managers or people that have a genuine interest in business, it can be quite lonely because you don't get the chance very often to sit next to someone and ask a question that you don't want your colleague to ask. So what would happen if you curated themes and had speakers to help address that? And that's what we started at the beginning of this year. So we began with Startup Month, we then moved to Innovation Month, we've had Disruption Month. Taking words like, on the surface, disruption, which sounds like something that crazy entrepreneurs do in Silicon Valley, but said, well, here's how you could do this on Tuesday in Auckland, in your business, regardless of what that business is. And as examples of some of the speakers, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had CEOs, we've had people from rural New Zealand, and we've had people from New York City. So one of the great talks we had is a lady called Sunny Bates, who's one of the curators for TED globally. And she talked to us about how to network, something that we seem really awkward at doing. So the events and the themes and the speakers are based on feedback that we get. And so the app that you use to come in, or the Mobi site, has a number of things in it. One of the things it does is it connects everyone in this room. And that came from an insight that said, look, it's lovely being in the same room together, but how do we connect? How do we do that? I don't want to do the awkward business card thing. So on that Mobi site, you'll have an ability to connect with anyone that's in the room. You can see everyone that is in the room and send the notes if you want to do that. The other thing you can do is ask questions, because again, some people don't feel that comfortable about shouting out, here's my question. So if you don't want to do that, you can send the questions through to me and I'll ask. And then we finally will describe Spark Lab as what it's not. And what it's not is a Rotary meeting. And that I don't mean with any disrespect to the Rotary members in the room, but what I mean by that is it's not something where we sit politely and we nod and we say thank you very much and we leave. We encourage debate, disagree with some things and let us know you disagree with them. And for this particular event tonight, we're going to do it slightly differently. So rather than a talk for 40 minutes and then open up from Q&A, we're going to do this differently where we're going to ask questions from the get-go. So what I would ask is, and we've had it backed up by Jenene, this is the chance to ask any question that you want, as random as that might be, to a very successful New Zealand entrepreneur. So please don't leave and go, you know, the thing I should have asked is that, ask it from the get-go. And if there's people watching in and they want to email in their questions, then please similarly do that. Which brings us to our wonderful speaker for this evening. So you'll know Jenene's businesses before necessarily you've known Jenene's name or her face, which started at the age of 20, which from a spare bedroom and a second-hand computer was a formation of a business that NZ Girl, which was now in 2015, was the largest social magazine of New Zealand, and in 2000 also the blog of the year. So an incredibly successful business. At 22, Jenene was then backed by a major New Zealand investor, the late Lloyd Morrison, and launched her second business, which was 18 Limited. Movac then, as you'll be aware, a very incredibly successful venture capital company, then backed the next business, which was launched into Australia. Then posted GFC was merged with a tech company creating Actual Dialogue. 2014 came the next business, which is Bloggers Club, and then today, Jenene is the founder and the CEO of Flossie, which many would call the urbanization of beauty products. So there are no shortage of incredible successes. Our chance this evening is to learn how that happened. How do you move from startup to gear change? What are some of the lessons? What wouldn't Jenene do if she had her time again? Please take the opportunity. So without further ado, if you could join me in welcoming Jenene in.
Thanks.
And so let's start with a little sort of a warm-up, which is, firstly, indication of the types of people that are in the room. How many own your own business that are in the room?
Cool.
Would like to own your own business but don't yet?
So cool.
Have walked into the wrong room and not quite sure why you're here. Good. So for those that are interested in setting up business, how did it begin for you at 19 without having done it?
Oh gosh, how long have we got here tonight? We could be here for a while. Look, I was working in the web dev space at the time, and very much in its infancy, if you can imagine, back in '99. We're pre-social media at that point.
Yeah, right.
Google launched the same year, and I basically, it was before the dot-bomb crash happened, probably 2 years before that, and there was this huge rise of the interweb internationally, and we were seeing lots of different types of things happening outside of brochureware, and it was becoming more and more of a community style of an interaction. And so what we saw was happening is that the youth audience, the teens in particular, were starting to use the internet as a place, as a way to be able to connect with each other. Now, I know that sounds really kind of pedestrian nowadays, but you go back 17 years ago, and that was not the case at all. We were great at building very simple websites, and that was about the extent of it, what was happening online. Yes. So that's where the idea for NZ Girl came from, was creating something that was local, and it was about being able to create connectivity and content, and it was really as simple as that.
So, but there'll be any of us that are in the room that once were 17 or 18, and there'll be 17 and 18-year-olds in their bedrooms now thinking about things, but not doing things. So why were you the 18-year-old girl that said, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, well, in fairness, I was 20, but I think, there's more of them now than there was back then, for sure. I think we've completely normalised the idea of starting a business at a young age. I think that's awesome. Yes. And I'm a big fan of it, because I think the more you can learn that sort of stuff, the more self-aware you'll become, and you learn so many more lessons and have, a happier, fuller life. But I don't know, I think if you'd ask my mother that question, and she'd probably say I've always been this way.
Is she here tonight?
No, she's not, unfortunately. But she would back up that I've I guess always had an entrepreneurial streak in me. I started a car wash company when I was 9. Charged all the local neighbours far too much for cleaning their cars. So.
And was it always going to be digital, the business?
I got a real taste for computers when I was in my first job working for a software company, Information Tools, which has gone on to be an incredibly successful company. And I started there as an account executive, and I thought that was a pretty darn fancy title, to be honest. Executive, at 16, yeah. And I started to kind of get my head around what was happening in this space. Back then, downloading email took a couple of hours on a CompuServe, so it was a pretty basic infancy of it. But I actually went from there to do a programming course at what was then ATI. Pretty bored, went to the back of the classroom, really didn't focus at all, but I really did get a taste for it, and it went from there. And I'm such a geek. I love data. I'm all about what's going to happen in the future and how we get there. So I think I just found my sweet spot, to be honest.
And you made the comment, which already we're getting the questions on, it's become more normal to have your own business, to have your own ambitions at a young age, and then to set up your own businesses. Why do you think that's happened?
Well, I think we can thank all the global mega brands online that all started really young. Mark Zuckerberg is a really great example of that. We've seen so many wonderful billionaires created out of what seemingly, bedroom stories. I mean, I'd love to be able to add a few extra zeros to mine to be the same kind of story. We'll get there eventually, hopefully. Yeah. But I think that has normalised. It's made it okay to give something a crack. And one of the stories I've always told is one of the great things about having a crack at it as a young person, in your 20s, as you're learning more about yourself, is it's a little bit like watching the kids go flying past you on the ski field. They do that to me anyhow, because I'm a really crap skier, but they go flying past me, and I think it's because they have no fear of falling over. And in your 20s starting your business, that's exactly what it's like. You don't worry about the mortgage and the kids and the stability and the reputation and all those things that kind of stifle us as we get older. You actually, you just have this want and passion and desire to create something and give something a go. And, embracing that's amazing.
So how about the other part of that, though, which is parents? So it's wonderful that people are more bold and ambitious, yet parents weren't brought up in that generation. And so one of the questions going on at the moment is, how do you solve for a generation of kids that want to go faster, bolder, fail fast, and still for a number of us with kids, failing fast is interesting for us, but not that cool for our kids.
Yeah.
So any tips that for the parents in the room that you'd suggest?
It's a really good question. I was mentoring a Tiger University student recently, and his father sits on a board with me, and he said, "Can you help my son out? He's got a business idea." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I was happy to do so." And he told me his idea, and it's got some good merit, and they've obviously put some good thought into it. But the feedback I gave to him, the father, afterwards was it's really kind of irrelevant as to how good it is or not at this point. It's such a great opportunity for him to learn so much about himself. And if it fails or succeeds, I think is sort of irrelevant at this point. It'd be amazing if it did, and it created this thing that he could be sprung into the world with. But actually, he's going to get so much more out of that than sitting in a corporate environment where he may not get to try to be innovative. He may be very boxed into a very particular way of looking at the world, and that's it's really hard to get back out of that. Wouldn't know, I've never been in corporate, but sure. That's from what the outtake I can see is, you've got to have that confidence to let your kids fail, right?
Yeah.
We can't pick them up all the time, and I think our generation having kids, we're going to be more open to them giving things a go. My parents' generation, absolutely, they were so much more about look after yourself and make sure that you've thought about the worst case scenario and you can handle that, and that's it. My parents have been incredibly encouraging for my entire career. So,
and do you think how much of your success in your CV is because you didn't have corporate experience?
Oh, a huge amount of it, but it's a pretty hard question to answer because I can't compare it. So I don't know what my path would have looked like had I not got glandular fever at 16 and left school and hadn't gone down the path that I went.
Sure.
I'm sure it would have still always been a little bit unusual, but I think it most certainly headed down an incredibly unlikely path as a result of just a variety of things that happened in my life. But I'm a big fan of making it up as you go along and having confidence to do that. And I think that's probably, if I was to narrow everything down, that's probably my one rare trait that I've got. And I'm okay with that.
So talk a little bit more about that, because in previous versions of SparkLab, we've heard about something called the imposter syndrome, which comes with some negative connotations, but it's not at all. Do you mind just exploring that further?
It's funny, Simon, that's the second time this week someone's talked to me about the imposter syndrome.
Right.
I remember the first time a journalist asked me about it. I reckon I was probably 23, and I obviously had never heard of, and to put it in context, I'm 38 now. And I was like, I was a bit affronted actually when she said this to me. But I thought about it, I went, actually, yeah, I most certainly, you have those moments where people are going to work out that I don't really know what I'm doing here. But I think when I first started NZ Girl, I had never had anything to do with business. I had never created anything from scratch before, other than just the stuff that you do as a kid, right? I had no experience in marketing, employing people, managing timelines, or any of that kind of stuff. I was really limited in my experience. I'd certainly never sold advertising before, and I rocked on up to advertising agencies and went, hi, I'm Jenene from NZ Girl, and I've got this for you. And they just looked like I was selling rocks or something. They thought I was completely and utterly crazy. And I remember within the first 6 months realising, because I had this huge, excited, all these cool things we could do, and how disappointed I was by the number of marketers I met who just didn't care. Not about me or what I was doing, didn't care about what they were doing or what they were creating or how they were marketing it. They had so little passion for it. And that was probably when I first started to drop the notion of imposter syndrome and not worrying about it, because I realised that actually it was a bit of just a non-event. It really came down to you actually just have to have that belief in yourself, and it doesn't matter whether you're vulnerable within that. It's okay. In fact, your vulnerability is going to make you a powerful person.
Is that something the room can empathise with? Seeing that notion of... So how does it help you, though? So that's lovely. But how does it actually...
That's nice.
No, what I mean by that is...
It sounded slightly condescending,
no,
didn't
it's
it?
not at all what I mean. But how
We should have had a wine first, Simon.
How does that attitude help you tomorrow? Like, how does that actually play out?
Which bit, the vulnerability?
Yeah.
When you have a would-be investor tell you that your idea is basically shit. And why would anyone ever use it? And trust me, you just get that all the time. It took catching up with the lovely Vaughan Rousseau recently for lunch, and he was like, oh, dude, get a line. You know, it takes 100 presentations in order to get the one. And like, oh, phew, okay, well, that makes me feel so much better. Because it is soul-destroying going out there capital raising, which, you know, is a subject we're eventually going to get to, so it's a nice DJ link into it. And because it really is, you know, this is something you feel really strongly about yourself. And when you put it out there and it gets judged by everybody else, and then they squish it into all sorts of ways that we don't really want them to squish it into, to be honest.
Yeah,
and so that takes an enormous amount of power of your own self-belief and self-awareness, ability to listen to that, take some of that on board, filter some of it out, you know, not let it get you down. It's a really hard balance across all that stuff. So that's how vulnerability, I think, helps me day to day.
So there's an interesting tension, isn't there? Because there's the vulnerability piece, and yet there's the resilience, because you are going to be told no, but you just keep getting back up. Yeah. So you, of course, you've toggled between those two things. Yeah. And what built the resilience, do you think?
That's a good question. I think I have a natural inbuilt ability to not give up. I think, you know, my mum gave me a placard that sits on my desk, and it says, never, never, never give up. And I had an employee once say to me, I've worked out why you're the boss. Why is that? She goes, well, I can sort of get my head around never. Oh, I'd definitely be giving up at never, never. But never, 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 you're totally crazy. But it's also, you know, you have every strength, you have an equal weakness, right? So one of my strengths is incredible resilience. My weakness is my inability to give up on anything. So striking a chord between those two things, well, that'll be something when I'm 60 we can talk about, and I'm sure will still be a balance issue for me.
Gotcha. So it's one thing to start a business successfully. It's another to gear change it to something such as what NZ Girl is now.
Oh, well, NZ Girl's not even the story. So, you know, my business is Flossie. That's where I spend my time on. So probably, should we just explain the difference between it? Might be a good idea. So I started in NZ Girl 17 years ago, and it's had all sorts of lives. You know, it's done all sorts of stuff. We've had a clothing range and makeup range and swimwear and stores and retail, all sorts of stuff. And it's, you know, become user-generated content platform. You know, it's lived all sorts of lives. And about 4 years ago, we started to see the emergence of blogging as a serious business, not just as a, you know, somebody wanting to talk out loud for the world to hear. And so we created a club effectively within NZ Girl called Bloggers Club, and it was a community, and it had a platform that went with that made it easy for bloggers to publish, but in a commercial way, not like just using a WordPress site, but actually here's a way in which you're going to be able to commercialize yourself in the future if you sort of follow these sorts of rules. And it was wildly successful for us, to the point where we ended up sort of picking Bloggers Club out of NZ Girl and putting NZ Girl underneath Bloggers Club, and then becoming a social influence agency, and that happened over the next 2 years, which kind of brings us to today. And so BC, as it's been rebranded recently to, looks after, you know, hundreds of different social influencers and connecting them with brands to commercialise them. I'm a director on that nowadays. Our CEO is Spencer Willis, who's in the crowd here, and he manages an incredibly dynamic team, and it's a really cool business. But that's not where I spend my time. My time's in Flossie, and Flossie has had its own pivot point. We started as effectively, you know, couldn't have told me this at the time, but a niche deal site. We saw the opportunity post-GFC to help get women into services within the hair and beauty industry, where, you know, your salon vendors were finding lots of spare inventory. People weren't coming in as frequently as they, and we were relatively successful into that. And then around the end of 2014 was where we started to see the on-demand economy arise, and that's where the likes of Uber came from. Yes. Where it was all about how do you help people get what they want when they want it. And that's when we undertook a significant pivot and said, this is no longer about a price-driven opportunity. This is absolutely about convenience. And let's shift the entire proposition of how women think about getting services booked on its head. Let's flip it around, and let's make it really easy for you to get what you want when you want it. Women aren't booking 6 weeks in advance anymore. They want it now. And look in the mirror, oh God, I'm going grey, I need it today. this is what's driving it. And so we started on that journey, and it's been a really, 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 really big journey. There's so many parts of that. There's kind of a summary of the 3 parts. So NZ Girl still runs a standalone blog. Belinda Nash looks after that. And then I do a little bit of board work. So I'm on the Simplicity, the new non-profit KiwiSaver board for my sons.
Yeah, right.
Just a bit of fun.
So how would you, in terms of so there's obviously a difference in running a startup business to what is now an incredibly successful growing up business. What's been the biggest surprise for you personally in running the 2 different sorts of enterprises?
That's a good question. I still run everything like a startup. So,
but what does that mean?
Well, for me, incredibly agile. So we work really hard to let process improve our efficiency, but not be there for the sake of it. I think that's one of the lines you've got to be really careful of drawing, that you don't find yourself doing stuff that feels like you're checking boxes to make everybody feel comfortable, as opposed to actually being there to help you go faster. And that, when we're across any of the businesses I operate in, it's all about how do you make the boat go faster.
Yeah. So you go through a period of doing a capital raise, which presumably is another whole cauldron of complexity and options.
Yeah.
Key learnings for you through that process. Why did you end up where you ended up?
Where did I end up?
with the partners that you ended up with.
Oh, right. Okay, so it's good to know what the outcome is. Look, I think the reality, if you're a tech founder, and you are trying to grow a significant business is going to scale, is you don't stop raising money.
Right. Yep.
You basically never stop unless you're able to fund this yourself, or somehow you miraculously are able to raise an enormous amount of money in one go.
Yes.
Generally, it means that someone's going to want you to raise more money enormously later, as well, as a lot of New Zealand success stories have proven. Venn, Zero, lots of them fall into that. So as a CEO and the founder, you just have to just wear that hat, man. You're wearing it all the time. You don't stop doing it. And it's so hard to go with the ideal path of what you would like to have, because it's not always available to you. And there is a journey of learning and proving. That means that there's a certain amount of taking what you can at the moment that you're in, and then hoping that will get you to the next part. And within that next bit, you might look for a slightly different part of that. I guess what I mean is that, the investors that I have today may be different from some of the investors that I had very much at the beginning, based on being a much smaller enterprise then versus what it is today. So you find that, there are much more hardcore investors that are making decisions on very different parameters than what, say, your seed guys at the beginning. You might be chucking $10,000 or $15,000 at something versus, throwing $500,000 check in the pool.
So I'd like to explore a couple of things within this. So there's the you selecting them as a partner, and then them agreeing to go with you. So starting with selecting them, because there's people with money, there's organisations with money.
Yep.
But your decision was slightly different, wasn't it? It was more than just the cash.
Oh, and then there's been times where it's been only about the cash, and sometimes you regret those moments in life, because you're going to take them with you anyhow.
Yes.
So, but they were a needs must in the moment of where you're at. So what do you? The hindsight's wonderful, isn't it? But you learn from that. Say, okay, well, where we're at today with Flossie is it's about strategic investment. We've got an incredibly powerful group of investors behind us. Great names. Stephen Tyndall and Teresa Gatting and Peter Cooper, this building, and Adrian Burr, and God, there's so many of them. They're amazing. They're all extraordinary people. And so whoever we bring on next kind of needs to fit that bill for me, that it says a lot about where Flossie's at, that this next person who's got behind it buys into the vision of what I'm trying to create here and wants to come on that journey. And that provides confidence and validation for others to get behind this as well.
So when you say strategic investment, so there's just money, there's money from people with good names, but you mean more than that, don't you? So when you say strategic involvement, what do you mean by that?
Look, strategic investment is a broad term. It could mean so many different things. So it might well mean that they somehow can make your journey go faster. Yep. So we know where we're trying to go, we know the things that we need to do. Any of those Do they bring a name to the table that opens new doors and helps us connect to new people, new networks and suppliers that could help us make things go a bit faster? Do they have advice or learnings and experience that could help us go faster?
Sure.
So, those really, that's from, I look at it from a strategic point of view of the business and what our plan is, and then how they may fit into that plan. Now, not all investors fall into that category, but you want within your mixture some of them to be that. And I think the key difference is the ones that don't fit that they're aware of what their parameters and boundaries are, and you've managed their expectations within that journey. I have 40, two new ones, 40 different shareholders on Flossie, which is quite a large group. And you can imagine a number of people go, oh God, how much of your time do you spend looking after shareholders? Very little. And I think that's, part of making sure we've tried to get that mixture right ongoing, but also being proactive in the management of them too, that, we're really open with information, we share it with them regularly, we make sure that they feel like they're on this journey. Yeah, right. Because, the point of having that many is that it is a journey that they are part of, and it is slightly family-like in that way.
Because I'm sure for a number of us in the room, hearing 40 successful
scary, right?
business people, all with a vested interest in making sure that things are going to plan, that sounds like it would be a huge amount of time. So how do you court them? How do you go through the process of cold calling, door knocking?
Yep, all of that. I think having been around for a long time it certainly works to my advantage. It's really interesting. I reckon I sort of saw the tide turn for me at a personal brand point of view, maybe 2 years ago, where maybe it was the 15-year mark of running my own businesses, where I could pick up the phone and call someone and chances they would have heard of something that I've been doing. And that's really useful.
Sure.
It's incredibly useful. Otherwise, you're one of how many different people trying to get a return phone call.
Yes.
But that didn't happen, as I said, overnight. That took a long time, and I've had to go to openings of envelopes along the ways to get to that point. I've been a really big pain in the ass for lots of people. So yes, there's that. But I still will scour various lists, be it company's office. I'll see who's been involved in what recent raises. I will look for introductions of how we connected. I use all the resources that are available to us on the internet to figure out a warm lead if I can get it, so I can get an introduction as opposed to having to go cold. And I've got a really, really sharp, smart deck, which has had a number of different people be involved in the creation of that, right. Which means you're going to take a lot of beating up through that process and, sure. Get over yourself. It's, you take on board that feedback, make the changes. I can tell the story really well. I know it very well, and I feel very confident about the business it's doing. So all those things help. Yeah. We're able to go in with a really concise. This is what I'm looking for. Generally, get the airtime. Whether you convert them, and your conversion rates, I believe, are anywhere between 1% and 10% in New Zealand when it comes to investment. So you've got to get used to hearing a lot of. Yeah, right. I'm not interested.
So you're approximately your number of investments times that by that conversions. That's how many. That's the journey you've been on.
Done hundreds and hundreds of pitches. Right. Yeah.
Which is something that you hear a lot of, and you kind of go, "Sure, you have," but legitimately,
have.
Right? Yeah,
right. You use Pandora Music at all?
Yep.
Okay, so the guy who created Pandora has an amazing story of where. Basically, after they had come up with a genome project of how they were going to be able to measure music, and it was this cool idea. He was way before his time.
Yes.
Had some early stage investment, burned through that. Then not the GFC, the dot bomb happened. Everything pulled out, and he had nothing left. And a variety of different of his music guys stuck with him, worked for free for shares, and they did this for a period of time. And they were down to their last few dollars in the bank account. And he had gone out and done 375 presentations before he got the funding he needed to get to the next level. I think now, I understand it's something around the $35 billion market capitalisation. Yes. It's huge. And so, I get faith in those stories. Sure. Kind of go, okay, all right, good. Hang in there.
So let's now...
It's so true, right?
So if there's someone in the room now thinking, I need to do a raise because I want to get going, and I think I know the person that I'm after, what's the practical tip that in their first Talk us through what you would do if you were in their shoes. You don't have a reputable name, but you've got a good business plan, it stacks up. What would be the path you'd take?
Ooh, that is a tough one. And it's a tough one because I don't know anything about their story. I don't know anything about what they're trying to sell.
That's right.
And that makes it really hard to give them advice. So this is really homogenous.
Sure, yeah.
I would go and socialise myself within the community of whatever the industry it sits within for a start. And that is, I would go, okay, if it's in healthcare, I'm going to go and spend more time in the healthcare sector. I'm going to get really familiar with who's talking and dialoguing in the communities online, because there's lots of that great stuff now, and you can, this is the beautiful thing about digital, right? You can insert yourself in the middle of a whole bunch of different conversations really easily, and you don't need to have any kind of reputation. You got to ask good questions.
Yep.
And people will listen if you have asked good questions. So you can create dialogue there. You could, go to various events, these sorts of stuff, really get a bit more niche, so that you can at least have some sort of awareness of what that ecosystem looks like. Because the ecosystem is really important to whatever you're selling. You need to really understand it, first of all. And maybe you've done all that. Look, there are a number of different avenues available for early stage funding in New Zealand, and mix reviews on that. I'm sure we'll probably get to that question next, so I've alluded to it. But I still think that they're worthy of exploring. But before even going down that path, I'd be getting a really, really smart deck together. Right. And there are really good blueprints and templates for that online that can give you good guidance. Happy to link anyone to an article that someone sent to me yesterday that I thought was just a beautiful example of, here are the 5 things it needs to say. Get all the guff out of it. Fantastic. Bullet points. People don't read. Keep it skimmed.
For those that are dialing in that aren't in the room, we will post that up into the Facebook site so that everyone can download it.
Yeah.
So let's go to online capital raising,
yeah.
where I guess one of the wonderful things about digital, it means that you don't have to physically knock up on someone's door. You can go to crowdfunded platforms. You can go privately or publicly.
Yeah.
What's your view on those?
We're streaming this, aren't we? Yeah. It's a small town. I'm going to sanitise myself. Look, I think there are some great people doing some really good things. I'm going to lead with that.
Okay.
Okay, cool. No, I didn't say leave. Look, I think it's a myth that you can expect to throw something up on one of those and have it deliver. It's just not true. Yeah. Any one of the successful crowdfunding raises that have happened in New Zealand or Australia in the last couple of years have had at least half of the investment raised by the founder before it's gone online.
Yes. Because
momentum is really important to it. It needs to have, this going so that people can't jump on the bandwagon. And that's what they're good for. But you've got to go eyes wide open into that you don't kind of get to pass on and walk away and go, oh, you guys look after it. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing over here. Because that's just not true. So either way, you still got to go out there and raise the money. Yes. And look, we are very much as a country in the infancy of understanding how to support new business. I think we've got a whole variety of wonderful partners trying to get behind it. Spark's a great example of that. They get behind, and I'm not paid to say that, behind the Lightning Lab is a great example, and they bring together seasoned entrepreneurs and successful business owners. But I think the challenge that we've got to get right in this country is not automatically make founders feel like just because someone has the money, they have all the answers. And it's a really big hole, an easy hole to fall into if you're green in that space and you're so badly seeking advice and wanting people to give you this. You can actually probably knock your own confidence on that journey if you get a little bit too attached to what everybody tells you. I like it a little bit, if you're going to have a newborn, everybody's going to give you parenting advice, right?
Sure.
And you're going to have to smile and, yeah, that sounds great. But you'll figure out which ones you want to listen to and which ones are actually valid and which ones aren't. Yeah. So I'm sitting on my microphone, there we go.
We've had the privilege of having Snowball as an example of one of the Snowball Effect talk at Spark Lab. And I think one of the things that really surprised me is the amount of due diligence that a platform like that will go through to determine whether you're right to go for a raise on them. So it's not I don't mean to put words in your mouth. it's not a pirate marketplace, is it? There's credible systems to be able to go through.
Absolutely. But it's a double-edged sword as well, though, because, sometimes those... Because, you're talking Mara and Power investors, and their responsibility is to make sure Mara and Power investors don't lose their money, right?
Yep.
And Mara and Power investors typically aren't high-risk investors. They don't really feel that comfortable with the idea of creating a brand new marketplace that never existed before with no benchmarks that you can point to as an example of why the fact that you're not going to lose all their money. So they start to become eerily traditional in how they position and seek investment versus the kind of investors I've got. And look, I know my journey is different from many others, but almost all of them, bar maybe a couple, are high net worth individuals who are really good at investing in new business. And Peter Cooper, who owns Britomart, is a great example of that. He gets behind one or two things and he goes, I'm going to support because I believe in what you're doing, but I want to be able to try and encourage young entrepreneurs and new business in New Zealand. And so his diligence comes a lot more from his gut. He asks really good questions, and don't get me wrong, he's going to get his guy to look at the financials, and
Sure.
They're going to do what will be a much lighter version of it, and he's going to come back to, does he believe in me? Does he believe in the idea? And does he think it's possible that we can pull it off? Yeah. It's a pretty different set of questions.
Sure it is. But let's if you don't mind, let's go to some of those questions, because one of the expressions we heard at Spark Lab last night was that investors back the jockey, not the horse.
Yeah.
So the importance of the person that's going to front and run that business. If the roles were reversed and you were deciding on whether you were going to invest, what are those attributes that people go looking for?
Yeah, look, and I think that's absolutely right. You could ask my last 40 investors, and they all say that they got behind it not just because they believe in the vision of Flossie, but they believe in my ability to pull that vision off. And that's such an important part of it. And right back to the first investor I brought on board at 22, Lloyd Morrison, an incredible man, and he said at the time, I've invested in the Verve, the publisher. And I had no idea what that meant. I had to go on and go, what does that mean? He believes in me. Oh, that's quite nice, isn't it? But it's true. I mean, that's what people do, right? The ideas are, in some respects, secondary to their belief that you can actually bring that idea to life. So being the kind of person that can be open and honest about that is really important. So there's a whole mindful of characteristics, because there are different types of entrepreneurs. If we look at the landscape in New Zealand, there are those who are really out there and those who are really not, and, so it's right across the board. But they all have some common characteristics, and I think that's tenacity. I think it's a really high level of insightfulness. They can think big picture and futuristically. They can look at and kind of get a feel for what it could be, and they can break it down. Like I'm all about the elephant. How do you break the elephant down? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? They can see that stuff, and they can figure out how they can then put it back together. Because most people can come up with an idea, but your ability to execute is the hardest one. So demonstrating the fact that you understand how to do that, and not just waffle a whole bunch of stuff, but very clearly articulate what that plan would look like, and fill someone with confidence as you do that.
Great answer. Mentors, coaches, etc. Do you believe in them? Do you have one? If you have one, how did you pick them?
I don't have one. I have lots of people who I would call guides in my life. So Lloyd would have been my early one. He died a few years ago, which was pretty devastating for a number of us, because he was, really good at looking after a couple of, young talent. And by the way, that's what I'd like to do in the future. When you talk about this whole idea of, characteristics, it's kind of, once I kind of get to the big exit, I'd like to put my own fund together, and I'm not there yet. So he was one. Tim Cook, who's my chair on Flossie, he is phenomenal, and he has been a real turning point for me in the Flossie journey. Having a chair that you have a really strong rapport with, that is part cheerleader, part challenger, is critical, and that for me is what a mentor feels like. And then there are probably half a dozen people whose opinions I incredibly respect and will go to for, advice, really candid advice when I need it. And that, is from my other half, Scotty, to, Spencer and Bloggers Club. There are people around me who I'll reach out to and go, can you just help me work through this?
So you're someone that has 40 shareholders. You've got a number
It's in one business.
Well, just in one business. You've got 40 in that business. You've got a number of different mentors or guys you talk to. What tip would you give the room on how to get the best out of those relationships with the likes of mentors and guides? Because we hear a lot about how important they are, but presumably only if you get value out of them.
Yeah. And you've got to know when to move on from those relationships too. I think that it's, this probably naturally lends itself to a conversation around board structure, right? Because a board tends to be a bit of a mentor for a CEO, and at least I believe that's what it should do. I don't think we've necessarily adopted that fashion in New Zealand as yet. It's a very Americanized way of looking at boards. You're about getting behind the founder. Here we tend to be a little bit more, I don't know, challenging, but not necessarily strategic sometimes. And
Sure.
it's a whole other level of conversation, I'm sure. But so knowing what you need is really vital, and then knowing when someone's able to provide you that versus actually are taking you on paths that aren't right for what you need to get where you're going. So I think with anyone who's on this journey, you have to have a really good level of self-awareness. And that means not just self-confidence in what you're doing and blind faith, but actually where you go wrong and what you're not good at and actually what you need to work on.
Yeah, very good answer. Couple of questions in a similar vein, which is the attractiveness of bringing partners in is equity and experience and money.
Yeah.
But how do you protect your equity? Is there a rule of thumb that you're going to say, I'm not going to sell down any less than X? What is X?
No, not for me. Like, everybody has their own. But Lloyd said to me when I was, a kid, you're better off to own less of something worth more than more of something worth less. What's the point of owning 100% of something that's got no value?
Yeah.
So my business is all about increasing shareholder value. And that means I care about the share price. And even though we're not a publicly listed company, I treat it like it's a publicly listed company in that way. I treat it in the way that I update everybody at the same time with the same information, and the way that we ensure that nobody's in the dark at any one time. But also, I really care about the price per share.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic answer. There's been, for different reasons, some press lately about women in business. And I'm not going to fully go into this topic other than to ask, is this a in your mind, glass ceilings, is this a reality or just a boring topic?
That's because you're a man.
I say it from a woman's point of view, because my belief is that a woman can do far better than a guy can any time.
I love hearing that.
You can shoot me, I don't care.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, I'm sorry, but most females have their heads screwed on way better than guys. They just don't get it. You do.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much so. And I really do, because it's nice to have that. I mean, I would love to say that it's completely gender irrelevant, because we just, people are people and you back personalities and abilities and capabilities, etc. But unfortunately, I have sat in investment pitches and had unbelievably sexist comments pulled out on me, and ones that would make you blush as a man. And actually, you'd think the reaction to that would be to do what probably the generation before me did: dress more like a man, be more male, act more male, right? I'll tell you what I do. I go like this. Because I'm all of this. This is me. And this is how I interact. And so I kind of go, let's blow the glass ceiling up. And let's try and encourage as many women as possible to be really, really good at what they do. But let's also encourage just as many men to be great at what they do. And when it comes to coming across sexist individuals who act in a certain way, I go, hey, thanks. It's good to know who you are, because I don't want you in what I'm doing, because we don't need your type. Thanks very much. They're limiting. They'll hold you back.
Fantastic answer. You talk a lot in some of your blogs and media about...
Getting my water, because it's quite far down. Sorry.
About doing things like being passionately disobedient, about challenging the status quo. Is that alluring and endearing to potential investors, or is that a she's not quite right for me. For
Well,
that very
it's
reason.
definitely a good way of working out what camp they fall into.
Yeah, sure.
I think previous answer probably answered that quite nicely in terms of yes, passionately disobedient is something that I quite happily embrace. But I kind of like to have people around me who fall into that same category, or at least would like to think that they would like to fall into that category as well. I mean, there aren't a lot of straight people in my world.
Sure. Yeah, right.
And in fact, actually being on the Simplicity KiwiSaver board has been one of the straightest things I've ever done in my life. And it's really good for me because it's good for me to have something that's a little bit more square peg to my round hole, you know, and learn more about the traditional values of governance and regulations and all that kind of stuff. But equally, they're looking to have people help them think outside of the way that their industry's always thought. Because it's time for that disruption, you know, for lack of a better word, but it is time for that change. Yeah, so look, honestly, if I come across investors that kind of go, oh, no, she's far too frightening for me, I go, cool, that's okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
And so that talks a little bit to mix. And so go back to either board mix or go back to executive team mix. If you're the founder and you have that personality type, how do you structure people around you?
Carefully.
Sure.
You don't want lots of yes people, because that won't help you. You need lots of people who are brave enough to be able to stand up to you and don't do it just to be able to score points, but actually do it to help shape you and not to squish you. And it's a really fine line finding that thing out. Yeah. So my board structure on Flossie, there are 4 of us currently, and we will entertain at some stage a 5th as part of strategic investment. So Tim's great. He's quite traditional where he's come from, but he's actually got quite a high threshold for risk. And he's an experienced chair that really knows how to get the best out of a CEO, and that's exactly what I need. Someone who can pull me up and then go, I can help across these things with you, and you know, make gentle guidance and ask me questions that challenge me, that make me think about stuff. And he's really, really good at that. Mike Harden, who's been on the board for a long time, he's come from running his own businesses and selling it to a NASDAQ list. He's incredibly successful in his own right. He's really insightful within the data, and he will absolutely challenge me on all the points in here, and I will need to prove to him that we know what we're doing, but he stays on topic. And that's really, really important to me, that he doesn't go off on random directions that are completely irrelevant to our strategy, but he gets that, and that's why I love what he does. And Sharon Hunter is a wonderful bridge. She's incredibly insightful, and she's able to think at it from a consumer point of view, but incredibly business-minded. And it's just a lovely blend. So getting that mix is difficult. It takes time. You won't always get it right, and pulling the pin is a awkward, difficult, uncomfortable thing to do. But it always ends up working in the end.
I see. And is there a time when you're ready to bring in a board? So for people that have a business that may think, oh, my business is too small, is there such a thing as too small a business for a board?
Yeah, I think there is. When I first started going down this path, I was chatting to Rod Jury about it, and he said, for the love of God, don't get a board.
Right.
And I went, yeah, look, in theory, you're so right. And he is. In theory, he's absolutely right. But as soon as you're putting other people's money into your business, you have to have a board. That's not something you get to really decide on your own. You have to put governance into it. And look, there's no perfect formula. I don't know anybody that's ever got board structure right the first time, the second, third, fourth, or fifth time. You know, it evolves continuously as your business does. But I think if you're at a early stage, haven't got investment, and you've got everybody saying you just got to get a board, ask yourself why that might be. What is it that you're looking for? Because it might be that you do need guides and you need advisors, but you may not necessarily need traditional governance at that stage. There's a difference between the two. So then, which leads to, where do you find them? Is there the yellow pages of board directors? Is there a system? Well, there is obviously what's the National Institute of Board of Directors? Yep. Never looked through that, so it's obviously not where I started. Mine, have come out of the woodwork. So Mike Harden came to me and said, hey, I'm interested in getting involved in things. It was Rod Jury. He said, hey, you should meet Jenene. She's doing some interesting things. And that's where that came about. And naturally, when we started looking for investment, we found early board members were shareholders. That's now no longer a key criteria. In fact, it can actually be a bit of a hamstring.
Right.
So that's part of an evolution, I think, that naturally happens within a board as you grow and scale, that you'll be looking for more independent directors who can think about the business differently, so say in the beginning. So look, I think having people, board constructs are really important, not just dynamics of personalities, but what they bring to the table to fill in voids that you may have. And that's really critical and part of the self-awareness conversation of being able to go, well, what is it I'm missing in order to being able to achieve what I want to achieve? How am I going to find the people with that knowledge and then make sure that they have the right kind of dynamics and relationship that I can, enjoy and get out of? And
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's not easy, I get that. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting close to a close, so I would ask if you have any further or final questions, please do either shout them out or let us know. One of the questions is, as you prepare at some stage for exit, with that as a inline, how does it change your day-to-day decision making?
Look, I think as a founder, exit should be something that sits as a light, but not necessarily your most important guide. It's really easy to get consumed by that, and it actually be a distraction. So I have much shorter term goals, and obviously when you're doing investment, people ask you for 3 and 5 year anymore. They look at market size and what potentially you could take of that market, but they don't ask you to go and do a breakdown of your P&L for the next 5 years. And I don't think that's smart, because realistically, yeah, that's how close we're going to get to it. So the next year is the most critical one, and we have a really strong 5-point plan. We know what that looks like and what we're trying to go for, and it guides everything within the business. And eventually what comes from that is you get a feel for, once you hit that milestone, what that next milestone will be. And once we've hit those ones, exit is going to be something that naturally happens. If I've done what I said I'll do a year from now, we're going to have all sorts of opportunities open to us. But let's not get too far excited about retiring, at 40 and not being able to do anything ever again. Let's focus on doing the 10 times growth that's required in the next year, because it ain't going to be easy.
And is that, help us shape it, are we after 10x?
10 times growth this next year. We're on track. So all our metrics, we've actually grown 400% in the last 4 months. So really great growth in Flossie. If you break down our habitual customers, and those are people who've ordered more than 4 times, and you look at their spend per day and the growth of them per day, and we just keep that going, we'll do the 10 times easily, which is really encouraging, because I live and breathe data. I love data. I'm such a geek. But, so everything comes down to the roadmap. I know exactly the conversion rates that have to improve, the development program that supports that to see all those things go up. We live and die by this. And at the front end, it just looks like a really nice, simple to use, thing that constantly improves. But at the back end, there's a lot going on.
A question on KiwiSaver disruption. What's that journey been like?
Eye-opening. Really cool. So when Sam Stubbs, who's the founder, approached me and said, I want to be interested in, getting involved with what I'm doing. I'm like, why do you want me? I'm quite a female bent in everything I do. When I thought of KiwiSaver, to be honest, I thought quite conservative, stale, male pale. I just kind of had these things in my head. And then when he told me the journey of that, and he said, basically the banks are ripping everybody off, and everybody's incredibly apathetic about it. And because he came from running one of the biggest ones here, and I think, to be honest, he'd done all his time there, he'd done really well in his life, and he said, I want to give back, and he gave me his why, and I completely bought into the why. And he said, I think, we can follow a model that's happening internationally, which is a non-profit one, and actually give back to the good. It doesn't mean it can't get good returns. You have all the best people doing it. He's coming from a different motivation point, and all that profit that's being taken goes back to the people. And I looked and I went, that's interesting. This is a sales and marketing business. And he goes, that's right. This is all about getting Kiwis to care about KiwiSaver, because most of you don't give a flying rat's butt about it. Like this article that was out on Monday that $350 million of hidden KiwiSaver fees, and it makes the front page of the business section, not the front page of the paper. It's crazy. People just don't care. So it's going to be a huge journey, and it'll take time to get people on that journey. But I look at it and stand back and go, oh, man, if we get this right, this is the beginning of the massive disruption that, for me, links into, and I won't bore you on this too long, but this huge market correction that's coming. The 1%, the pitchforks are coming, and it's about time.
Sure.
It's time that the rip-off stopped happening, and the power of the consumer that's been building up in more consumer tech is going to happen in fintech, and that's going to change a whole bunch of games. And I'm really excited about being able to be on that, but not be the doer and be one of the directors.
Gotcha.
That's kind of cool.
So for those that don't know the website to check out?
Simplicity.kiwi. Yeah, so 65, well, I got the pitch now, just here now, this last part. So you could save, if you're average income from a young age, contributing on average rates, you'll save $65,000 extra by being with Simplicity. And I think for some of my team, they were in the 350,000 extra because of their contributions, salaries, etc. So, well, there's a calculator. Go check it out.
There's a check.
Thanks, Sam.
There are some final questions that have come that we won't now have time to go through, but what we will do is send all the questions to Jenene to ask her to respond, so we'll get answers out to all of you.
And I'm on Twitter as well, so yeah.
There we are. So thank you, because it's very rare to have someone sit as candidly as you have to tell the story from a 20-year-old in a bedroom with a second-hand computer to now the story of managing, in one business, 40 very successful entrepreneurs, playing a 10x business. It's a great New Zealand case study, and we should be exceptionally proud of you. So if you don't mind joining me to say thank you very much.
Thanks.
As a small token of appreciation from Spark, apart from for you taking the time, that's again
Thank you.
a huge thank you. And so all those in the room that are Spark customers, that's the final thank you. And that sounds like a sort of an unusual comment to make, but the only reason that the rest of us have enjoyed tonight is because Spark customers have asked for it. And because you've asked for it, Spark will continue to do it. So for those in the room, thank you. It means a lot, and it will help us go on a journey unlocking potential. And hopefully from this evening, there's at least something that you can take away and think about how you might change or do things differently within your businesses. Please don't be in a hurry to leave. The bar remains open. You're most welcome to use the facilities upstairs at Seafarers. We encourage networking bits and pieces. We take Spark Lab on the road shortly, so we'll be leaving Auckland, going into Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington, Christchurch, into Dunedin. There's more events still to come, so please keep an eye on the site. And once again, our sincere thanks to our speaker this evening.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
I was kind of hoping it's an iPhone 7. I'm joking. Absolute pleasure.